improvise.
Well, yeah, innovation on the fly. We've got an inventor in the front row.
Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Pascal Royal. I work in customer marketing for Citrix, and I'm very happy that you all are here, and we're happy to share with you some customer stories. We're going to, obviously, we've got a great panel of some really innovative customers with us. We've got Innovation Award finalists. We have our Citrix Customer Advisory Council member with Jim, and they have some, just some really cool things that they're doing with their implementations within their respective IT organizations. And so we want to just introduce you to them. What we'll do is I kind of have a few questions that I've prepared for them to give you kind of an overview of what they're doing at a glance. We'll talk about a few trends in terms of mobility and BYO and things like that. And then, we'll spend about maybe half the time doing that and the other half of the hour taking questions from you. So without further ado, I guess we'll kind of just go down the row and have some quick introductions. So Jim?
So my name is Jim Forbes. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for University Health Network in Toronto. We're one of the largest teaching medical centers in Canada. And we've been working on a strategy for Research Hospital of the Future under our direction of our CEO, Dr. Robert Bell. That strategy has meant a lot to the organization, a lot of transformational change in the way that we engage patients and the way that we design our systems. So mobility has a lot to do with part of that strategy, and I guess I'll get into that as we go further in the discussion.
Sure. Thank you, Jim. Neil?
And so I'm Neil Locke. I run BT's cloud and data center business around the world. Hopefully most people are familiar with BT as a telecommunications and service provider. I run part of the portfolio that we take out to our customers. We operate in 170 countries around the world.
Thanks, Neil. Susie?
Hi, my name is Susie Mann, and I'm the manager of Workplace Service Delivery at Westpac. At Westpac, Workplace Service Delivery is actually about partnering with suppliers to deliver IT services to the user. So we are a highly outsourced company. We have 36,000 staff and about 850 branches. So my particular field of expertise is in workplace.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Dennis Riccelli. I work for Takeo Incorporated. I'm a senior network administrator for them. We're based out of Rhode Island. We're a small manufacturing company. We manufacture heating, ventilation, air conditioning products. Family owned, been in business for over 90 years. We're on the third generation. And we have, with a recent acquisition, we have 8 locations throughout the U.S., 1 in Vietnam, Panama, and Canada.
Thanks, Dennis. And our 2014 Innovation Award winner, Autodesk.
Thank you. My name is Chris Lin. I'm VP Infrastructure at a company responsible for technology operations that help company run. So that goes from how we build product, how we sell product, and more importantly, how we help our customer to be successful. And by and large, Autodesk, if you're not familiar with the company, is a company that provides 3D software and services to help our customer to imagine, design, and create a better world. And the component of those 3D is very important as we look at our world. It is indeed a three-dimensional environment. And that's what we do.
Great. So, Chris, I'll kind of hang out with you for a second. So I want to kind of set some framework and talk about maybe 2014 and actually maybe the next 12 to 18 months. If you can maybe talk about what are some of the top initiatives that are important to you right now that you're working on in your organization.
Sure. We actually work on putting our graphics capability in our private cloud for the past 3 years. It was a rough start, I have to admit that, because we probably, number one, are not the majority of the VDI community and all that. The second part is that the cloud technology at that juncture was a little bit still evolving. So we have to do a lot of work, and I'm very happy to see that the world has kind of made enough investment in terms of enabling the rich application experience and all that. We're really happy somebody is helping solve that problem. So having those being done, what we're taking this thing forward is that we're taking that capability to run graphic applications in our private cloud and try to do two extensions. One is that we are trying to take what we learned on the private cloud capabilities and apply that to the future of our data center. I have a big program going on this year, over the next 12 months, is to create a virtual data center program. That is, why do people have to care? Where do I deploy stuff? And I'm very happy to hear that's the kind of thinking, not pre-orchestrated. I'm very happy to see that's the message I got from Citrix this year. Seems like folks are recognizing this is the direction that we want to go. The other program that we're running is really how can we solve the last mile problem? In the sense that I can run this in my control environment very well, but if I want to do remote graphics, that's the term we use, I want to run graphic-enabled app remotely and have the same fidelity. How can we reach that point to really start centralizing our infrastructure, and that will create a lot more benefits that we're doing.
So with that in mind, how do you see, specifically with regard to Citrix, how do you see, you've heard what we have kind of coming down the pipe in the next 12 months, and then what you currently have implemented. How do you see Citrix solutions helping you over the next year or so?
I think there are a couple of things that we are already doing, and there are a couple of things we need to check out, so to speak. So a couple of components. One is that solving the last mile problem. We already tested against some of our capabilities against our own internal cloud, and then put the Zen Desktop and Zen Apps on top of those things. So those are working. We already have our first level of effort done, and we're pretty happy with the results, so to speak. We will continue with that. So that part is a definite match. The other part, I think there is a potential that we can leverage that capability in the workspace, definitely. Use that if it fits and has the same timeline in our virtual data center program. Because where we're heading is that we're going to have a lot of on-prem private cloud node that's data center grade, but we will also connect to the regional public cloud vendor. Because I think that we're in an era where the cloud is almost like the new PC, so to speak. And we'll start with an era with branded solutions as well as white box solutions. So we will see a lot of choices. And we need to find a way to connect to these service providers based on their differentiation and also based on their capabilities. And sometimes it's just being able to push the application right next to the customer who needs that. That experience is very important. And we are certainly not interested in building our own proprietary solution. We're looking for partners to help us solve that problem.
Excellent, thank you. I'm going to jump around a little bit, and I'll come over to you, Jim. If you could just talk to us a little bit about your strategic imperatives over the next 12 to 18 months and really how Citrix Solutions are going to help support that.
Sure. I mentioned our CEO's strategy, Research Hospital of the Future, and it's had a large implication or large impact on the way we see IT in the organization. So if you bear with me, and I'll reflect on some of Mark Templeton's comments yesterday. We used to be the old traditional IT shop where IT said, no, you can't do this, you can't do that. We put up lots of barriers. But we've kind of recognized with this new strategy that we have to enable clinicians, improve their experience and improve the patient's experience as they exchange with the clinician who's dealing with them. What that's meant is that we've kind of redesigned all of our infrastructure. We've started to build out infrastructure to support SOA implementations, the implementation of SOA, so we can focus on securing the data and let the innovative clinicians who are out there reflect on what's necessary to engage the patient the way that they need to for their services. So that's been part of it. Our Privacy Commissioner Ontario has largely put a lot of emphasis on what she calls privacy by design, and that's a term we use frequently in Ontario. So again, in our thinking of IT, this is one of the trends that we're kind of applying to our thinking to make sure what is our role. It's protecting the information, limiting the distribution of that information out to the end nodes or storing it in end nodes, preventing it from being stored in end nodes is kind of one of our goals. So we've implemented the SOA infrastructure. We're rolling out several of the Citrix tools to help manage those end nodes, those devices. and to provide them with new features such as the share file so that they can store their information securely, centrally, as opposed to storing it on the device. Devices go missing all the time, they get stolen, they get lost. And that's a big concern for us in designing this system for a research hospital in the future.
Mm-hmm. So it's interesting, you touched a little bit on security, and I know, actually, Susie, that's also, I think with everyone it's a consideration with all of your intellectual capital, but I know, Susie, specifically for you. So if you want to maybe, I don't know if that fits into the parameter of your initiatives over the next, year and a half, speak to that a little bit, and also just how Citrix Solutions are helping.
Sure. So one of our key initiatives over the next year is the Bank of the Future sort of model that we have rolling out, which is a little bit what I talked about this morning as well. And essentially what it means is the use of stateless virtual desktops in the branches, which will basically enable the staff to move around the branch, which is becoming more and more important. It's moving away from the traditional branch. But obviously, you still want the level of security required around that user's access to applications and so on. So with that, however, if it was the traditional sense, it would take a long time to log on and log off. But with the stateless model, they're able to disconnect and reconnect securely and quickly, enabling a much better experience for our actual customers in the bank.
Excellent. And how do you envision Citrix Solutions kind of playing a part in that next gen?
So it's a critical component as we move from a distributed model of servers in each of our branches to a centralised model, and really relying heavily on our stateless provisioning of virtual desktops to our branch users. We also are embarking on an enterprise collaboration program at the moment, which will see us sort of move into the Zen Mobile space.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Dennis, talk to us about what's going on at TACO over the next year and a half.
Well, we're looking to work on our BYOD solution, Zen Mobile. We plan on implementing that shortly. With this day and age, everybody and anybody is bringing in devices wanting to connect with something different, so we have to be able to support that. And also we have all these other locations now throughout the U.S. That's the same thing. They want to be able to connect with multiple devices, and we have to be able to support them in there. On the other side of the country, we're a small company, small IT staff. We can't be everywhere, so we have to make sure we can support all that stuff.
Excellent. And how do you see Citrix? Besides, you talked about Zen Mobile and that, but is that sort of the key component that you're looking at over the next year, or do you see that with some of the other product stack? Because I know, for clarification, TACO is a company that, although you are small, we like to consider you pretty mighty because you're using the breadth of the Citrix product stack, which is incredible. So I just want to understand a little bit more maybe about how that's playing into the overall strategy.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're using basically almost everything Citrix has today. We've been using,
and we thank you.
We've been using Zen app since back in the WinFrame 1.8 days, 16, 17 years ago. Zen Desktop we've been doing for over 3 years. We have the NetScalers, the Zen servers, all the GoTo products. So we're going to continue with all that, continue growing it. Our GoTo Assist, we're actually going to kind of roll that out very shortly. We've already purchased the software for it, but we're going to start pushing it out to all of our end users so we can take care of them a lot better. Again, with the small IT staff, it's kind of hard. So,
right.
So we're going to continue that as the year goes on. We're just going to go as far as we can with it.
Excellent. Thank you. So Neil, we heard a little bit from you yesterday during the keynote, so there's a little bit of understanding around what's going on or what has led to this point. In terms of looking forward, can you talk about the next year and a half, and again, how you're furthering that partnership with Citrix to benefit your end users, your customers?
Yeah, so I did talk about it a little bit yesterday, but I think actually my fellow panelists have actually teed it up quite nicely, which is actually how hybrid cloud's going to work. On-prem and off-prem is pretty critical. How we can help Chris do what he needs to do, and how he makes the decisions between what he does himself and what he takes to a service provider. And there's lots of decisions being made around that. I think, and obviously we do that with Citrix Cloud Platform and Cloud Portal Business Manager today. But increasingly, the conversations about the application space and the device. And so how we start increasingly moving into that to enable that to happen on our cloud is a big focus for me with Zen App, Zen Desktop, and the conversation I've been having been having with everybody this week is how much of that is fully shared and how much of that is private in the cloud. And I think that decision still hasn't resolved itself. Different customers have very different views on how that will work, and we need to be able to support that.
Mm-hmm. So, I know a big topic of conversation right now has been around just innovation, right? Driving innovation in the workplace. With that innovation comes transformation. And I think that all of you are undergoing pretty significant business transformations that IT is, if not driving, then certainly leading. So I want to address that, have each of you kind of address the idea of transformation and how you've seen that happening, and how Citrix solutions are enabling you, again, to transform your business place. I guess I'll start with you, Dennis.
Lucky me. It's that work anywhere concept, work anywhere, anytime. Our employees now have the ability to have a family life and a work life and balance it and work anytime they want. It's just been amazing from what a transformation we've gone through. We can get so much more done, and they get their real-time information anywhere, anytime.
Excellent. Thank you. Anybody, feel free to jump in.
Well, I can share a little bit. I think technology is probably not the hardest part, but I was paying attention, perhaps. But I did caught two things that was part of the keynote that says culture and empathy. And I think a lot of innovation starts there, from my perspective, because innovation doesn't happen out of reading a white paper. It came out of people trying to make a change. And why do they want to make a change? Because they feel the pain. They want to make the world better. And I think actually starts there. And we ourselves are still trying to, for starter, figure out what kind of culture we need to build to make that creation process, to make those innovations bubble up and accelerate. So I think that's not exactly a technology play, but I do think it starts there. And technology is the tool to help us to trigger those thoughts, but you have to have the intent to get started.
Mm-hmm.
So just to comment, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, I know what we've been doing from a cloud infrastructure point of view is just making innovation labs available to people and actually letting them try stuff and do different things, see what it can bring to the business. And if you put the people resources with it, so subject matter experts in particular industries or particular technologies, you get some pretty cool results off the back of it. So we've run about between 30 and 40 specific innovation streams with our customers to say, actually we don't know what the outcome's going to be, but let's try and do something different on the cloud and see what comes out the back end.
Excellent. Jim, I know you were kind of...
Yeah, I was just going to say, in healthcare, it's completely ripe for transformation. There's lots of opportunities. One of the key things that I've kind of noted in many of these sessions I've attended, outside of this, most of the healthcare sessions or healthcare conferences, is that the focus is now on the patient. And as patients get more information and knowledge, that forces a change in behavior from the physicians. Physicians have to have more information available to them because their physicians are more aware. They can find more information sources on the web. And they take that information when they go to see their physician and they ask questions. So that's changed the dynamic and how they interact. It's also forced us from an IT perspective to realize that the rate of change in healthcare is enormous. There's huge potential for transformation. There's lots of devices and gadgets being created. I was wearing my Jawbone up earlier. I'm not wearing it now, but I'm very conscious about my weight loss. And so I've been focusing on that. And I realized as I started to track my walking and my sleeping patterns that there's really valuable potential for great tools to be created to change the way patients interact with the health system. And I think we're just on the cusp of that. It's just starting. So from an IT perspective, we have to be prepared and be enablers as opposed to the barrier to that innovation coming forward.
Excellent, thank you. Susie?
I think the ongoing transformation for us is really in our ongoing capacity to be able to scale up and down depending on the demands of our consumers. So with the move, obviously, of most banking from being, the walk-in branch only to then digital, And we see more and more campaigns that put more pressure on contact centres to respond to our consumers. So we need a fluctuating solution that allows us to really scale out quite significantly and wind it back as required. And for us, that's a big part of that ongoing transformation of the different use cases, scaling up for the types of contact centres required for the consumer.
And, I'm sorry, Neil, did you have a... No. I guess I was going to follow up, Susie, in that I think a lot of times we see the financial services sector as being very, very traditional, and the workers there being very, very traditional and having a certain mindset. How have you noticed at all sort of how your users are embracing this change, and are they embracing the transformation and kind of coming in there sort of willingly?
Certainly, I think particularly obviously in IT sort of corporate areas, there's the demand and the expectation of their device being accepted or capable of working from day one is there regardless of the traditional regulations and expectations, I suppose, of a financial institution. So coming up with a solution that you can securely deliver a standard desktop to, obviously, any device is really important for us. Not that we give it to all of our staff, but obviously there are those with certain requirements, and that's acceptable. I think another area that's been good for us has been the business continuity space, obviously, where we see the demand increase unexpectedly for certain use cases again, and that is a bit of a shift for us as well. And I think as a financial institution, to be able to maintain security in an unusual situation and anywhere, delivered anywhere, is really important as well.
So thank you. You each have sort of touched on different trends that are, it seems like, you've mentioned different trends that I think are probably influencing a lot of your decision making. So when you think specifically about your buying decisions and where you're looking to invest, are there any critical trends that you're seeing that it's absolutely dependent on that? I mean, it sounds like between BYO and consumerization of IT and things like that, those are probably big ones, but I just want to maybe go down and just have you speak specifically to the trends that are impacting your buying decisions. I'll start with you, Chris.
I would say, by and large, we are in an era that we shop more, but we are shopping for different things. I think we're in an era where a lot of the commodity level stuff like laptops, workstation, is no longer critical to our business, number one. Number two, people, once you give them a good new solution, like what we did, give them a different way to build products, people will choose the right thing because of speed and convenience. I think that's the way that's driving our consideration. So we're always looking for stuff that can help us execute a lot faster. And just the fact that we did that, our workstation purchases. Are there any Dell or HP people here?
Say sorry.
It's actually switched to the server side. So the workstation I actually purchased, kind of a lab-based, and also I think went down by 55% in 1 year. 55. And it's not that they don't have the work, it's now that they can go to the private cloud, crank so much faster, we're done, and they can get 100 machines at the same time. In the old world, they have 1 box, 2 box, or 3 box underneath their desk. So that's the kind of thinking that we have. What can we purchase to help us run faster and be effective? That's kind of what's driving our consideration.
Excellent. Dennis, how about you?
Ours is more about just increasing productivity, increasing our performance. We're always looking to get the data side, the server side rather, beefed up so they can get a better performance, get more work done. I was going back to the conversation about the BYOD. It's like one of the worst months of the year. It used to be January when everyone came in from Christmas with all the gifts. I think it was 45 different tablets, all different styles coming in. They all want to get connected. But nowadays, it's just become a lot easier to do that kind of stuff.
Excellent. Susie? Sure. So I think for us, we've really moved from purchasing infrastructure, that's the big shift for us, to sort of outcomes, so service. So the whole concept of the service model, end-to-end solutions, and obviously what that then means for us internally on how we manage that service and manage our staff to no longer prescribe, solutions from a technical component perspective and really step away from that and look at service outcomes. So the big shift is, from infrastructure, the server side, rather than obviously the client side, but from the server side to the services.
For me, it's about data sharing and identity. I think they're the two key areas that we're really looking at. And when we talk about consumerisation of IT, but actually individuals' identity, where that exists, how that gets managed across all of the world that we now live in, I think is a big opportunity that we're looking into about how that gets managed. Because I don't think it is the right of the IT department anymore. They've got to consider all the other areas that comes from, and I think that the data area is some of what you were describing about how you can make better use of that and do it in a trusted way and actually share public data and very private data in a really comprehensive way. There's a huge opportunity around that.
Sure. I think for us there's three main components, and you've already touched on them. One is privacy by design. It's very important to us, so everything we do is geared towards making sure that we're protecting any confidential or sensitive information we have within the organization, and being a hospital, we have lots of that. The second thing I would say, consumerization and mobility. In healthcare, those will really help enable transformation. I don't know if you've been to hospitals lately, but a lot of hospitals, including ours, we've kind of tied the clinician to the desktop. If they want to do something, they've got to go back to the PC. So mobility will really help in a productivity sense, but also change the exchange between the clinician and the patient. And then the third component is cloud. And I've been speaking, not here, but at other conferences, about the notion of a private community cloud for healthcare in my province, Ontario. And we recognize that in some cases there's significant benefits and improvements to security. In fact, if we can actually establish some sort of private community cloud for health service providers such as University Health Network. So those are the big trends that are kind of impacting our decision making.
And if you guys had a crystal ball, right, and you could look into the future and see what's going to happen, sorry, I'm moving too much. If you could see into the future over the next 5 years, I think that what I feel like I've seen is this conversation around mobility and security and BYO has been kind of the hot topic for probably the last 3 years, right? Really reaching a critical mass around now. But if you're looking out, say 5 years from now, if you had a crystal ball, what do you think the hot trends are going to be? This is just me picking your brains, right? And anyone, feel free to jump in.
I could probably just talk from a bank perspective. Obviously, we, as I hear of all banks, do the same thing. We're often on the oldest operating system because of all of our applications, which is, legacy apps create that challenge. I think with the rate of change of internet browsers and operating systems over the next few years, that we're going to see a really interesting new standard evolve around the concept of an SOE, which we will literally, by design, have multiple SOEs that can be selected. And that's obviously technically available now, but I actually think you'll see it in use. And I think that's certainly from a banking platform perspective going to help us. And obviously you don't want to be you're always as slow as that lowest common denominator. So I think as we move forward, we'll just see a different type of pattern evolve for larger corporates that are always facing this challenge of legacy apps holding you back.
Excellent. Chris?
A couple of things. Some will be more technology related, some will be how we actually get things done. So two aspects. One is that within my part of the responsibility, I view ourselves will be, if not fully, it will be highly, highly automated in how we do things within 5 years. And that being said, I would predict and envision my team no longer need to worry about what OS are we on, what version of the app we're in. We should get out of that business. Instead, we will be spending a lot more time to figure out where can we help the company to make more progress by sourcing the right stuff to put it together. So I think that will happen, and also with the maturity of the cloud service provider that we can source, I do see there will be a day that the trend will reverse. We started with a world that 3 years ago we see private cloud is more cost effective than going to the outside. I see that trend will reverse in about a few years, because I think when we reach that level of maturity and the quality that we can handle, then we'll be doing very different work. So that's on the technology side of the world. On the other side of the world, and I do see the change how we do stuff. Right now, we're mostly living in an economy of mass production, right? I do see a world when we have all these technology available and digitized, and when 3D printing and other digital manufacturing caught up, things connect. Then you can customize, make your own shoes by taking 5 pictures, and it will show up at your door with a perfect fit. You and I buy standard shirts, probably won't be like that 5 years from now. So that's the view. It may take a little bit more than 5 years, but I think we're heading that direction.
Heading that way. What do you think, Jim?
Actually, I was picked up on something Susie said a little earlier, but one of the things we talk about now, as far as the way we deliver IT, and we are very much headed towards service approach as opposed to being internal IT shop. We actually outsource most of our IT operations, and we've been doing that for 14 years. But one of the things we talk about when we talk about service delivery from an IT perspective is direct and indirect value adds, and we try to explain those in terms of the customer. And there are various customers in healthcare. There can be the patient from the clinician's perspective. There can be the clinician from IT's perspective, and from the government's perspective, it's the patient as well, because they're very concerned about outcomes and making sure that the system is delivering as it was supposed to. So we try to kind of reposition our thinking around how we're contributing to those value adds and indirect value adds from the customer's perspective, because that's interprets it or applies language that the business then understands.
Excellent. Thank you. Neil?
So I think service provision is a really good a good trend that is going to continue. Not worrying about what the infrastructure looks like, what name is on the server, how it's configured. Hopefully, we're going to be in a position whereby the actual infrastructure becomes ubiquitous. It's really easy to consume. There will be differences, but the differences will be on the service level that's given, rather than the actual technology that underpins it, and people will be able to trust the service level. I think that will be a critical thing. That if we can get there, that would be really good. And I think we'll end up with the CIO becoming, and I think Chris is kind of highlighting, the CIO is going to become a broker. They're going to have probably 20 or 30 key service providers that deliver different aspects of their business, and they're managing those service levels.
Excellent. What about you, Dennis? What's your take on the next 5 years?
Well, I think like what Chris was touching on was with the cloud. I just think the cloud is going to continue taking everything. The traditional data center is just not going to exist anymore in a facility. It's all going to be out in the cloud somewhere. So people like myself who take care of data centers as part of their job, well, that's going to kind of be phased away after a while. Yeah. Plus, you got more and more kids coming out of college now. They're a lot more computer savvy than the people who are still in the work environment. That's going to change dramatically too. They're not going to require as much IT support as they do today.
Right. So I have a couple of questions. I'm trying to be mindful of the time you guys have sparked for me. One of them, though, is let's talk about a little bit about your end users, not just your employees, but the people that you serve, whether it's the patients in the community, the end users, the production teams, and things like that. How has the technology that you've implemented really sort of changed their lives? If you can speak to, how has it changed their lives, do you think? Jim, I'll start with you.
Well, I kind of touched on it a little bit earlier. The interaction between the clinician and patient has largely been changed just by the fact that there's more information sources on the internet. But we've started to provide tools such as patient portals to enable patients to actually gain access to their own personal health record. This is a necessary step, I think, in the transformation process, because the more information patients have, the more they can take ownership in driving some of the changes that the healthcare system needs. So that's been a big step forward for us. From a clinician perspective, the relationship between the clinicians and IT, we've set up a large governance structure to work hand in hand with the physicians to make sure they understand where we're headed, and they're very excited about the fact that we're creating an environment that fosters innovation as opposed to an environment that shuts the door on them and says, no, you have to come to IT, and if we say no, it's no, and that's final. So we've changed that culture drastically, and that's changed the engagement as well.
Actually, Dennis, I kind of going to jump back to you really quickly here because I'm curious from your perspective, with Takeo, third generation, family-owned business, largely with keeping jobs in America, and just it's a very, I think, near and dear operational situation, right, that we look at when we look at Takeo. How do you think the technology that you've implemented and the team has implemented, how do you think that's affected your workers, from the business folks right on down the line to the folks on the front line, the forklift drivers, everyone? Because in my opinion, the way that you guys are defining or redefining mobility is pretty significant with how you're reimagining the manufacturing floor and things like that. So how do you think it's affecting people?
It's made everyone more productive. Our customers are benefiting from it because we're much more agile. We can do so much more now. We get real-time information. Like if a customer calls in, makes a change to an order, the forklift guy knows about it before he even picks the order that has already been changed. It just makes everything faster for our customers and our employees.
What did that, just real quickly if you could, what did that look like before? What was that sort of process before when an order was changed and you didn't have the technology that you currently have? What was that process like?
It would take days to get that information down to the warehouse because it's all paper-driven at that point. You have the customer service person on the phone writing down all the information, going to get the order, and okay, then enter it into the system. It doesn't get printed out until the following day when the manufacturing floor gets it. Warehouse still doesn't even know what's going on with the order. Doesn't even know there's an order been placed, so they're not prepping for anything. And all the forklifts, they will go out and pick all their orders. Everything will be on paper. At the end of the day, they turn them in. So something you did at 7 o'clock this morning doesn't get registered until 5 o'clock at night. Where now it's instant.
Right, so you've gone from days to practically things happening, decisions being made, and execution happening almost in real time. Yeah, amazing, really cool. Susie, what about you? Like, how do you feel the technology that's happening, particularly from a workplace perspective and your end users and things? How is it changing the lives of your end users?
Primarily in the branch, definitely. So that was something that was often noted by customers. I think the delay in logging on and logging off the different devices, and obviously as a lot of banks are doing this great concept at the front desk, and you didn't want the situation where the customer had to provide all their details again at the second point of call. So that's probably the primary area. The other area would be just the contact centres. So the capacity, as I was saying earlier, to scale out has meant we've got more people on the phones, so we're able to respond more appropriately to the actual the dial-in numbers, if you like.
So it's like businesses keeping up with the speed of life.
Yes, which is all, based on all the digital campaigns that occur, it can expand very, very quickly the requirement to respond to our end users.
Excellent. Neil, how about for you? I think maybe your perspective might be maybe a little bit different in terms of being a service provider and what that means for not only your customers, but for their customers.
Yeah, but I think the thread of speed is absolutely critical. I mean, we see it in our customers in life sciences and in banking, and all of that is, for too long, IT just seems to be a barrier to do things, or is taking up an inordinate amount of every individual's time, when actually it should just be an enabler. And the sooner we can make those switches that we've already heard, the better. Because I hear people about in life sciences where they're still creating data stores on data drives under their disks and then putting them in a briefcase and then taking them somewhere else and plugging them in to share the data. And I'm just thinking, why is that person even worried about that IT infrastructure? They should be, they're brilliant scientists in their case, brilliant researchers, and the more we can get them doing that and doing less IT function, the better it will be for everybody and for their businesses, fundamentally.
Yeah. So I'll have you comment, Chris, and then we'll kind of open it up and see what questions we also have.
Sure. From my perspective, actually, so to speak, mileage and experience varies, and I'll just pick probably one or two examples. Maybe that's helpful. So when we roll out the technology and all the solution prior to our delivery of having a new ability to do things in the cloud, we have lab managers who have room full. These are not data centers. These are in buildings, right? Room full of equipment, and they have to boot, jiggle, and all those other things. Not only that, every weekend they have to come in and dump the water outside because they have a condenser, special air cooling unit. That's how they live their life. And if you're an engineer that you're trained to think and design stuff, that's not what you want to live your life. But somebody got to do it. think from that perspective, that person had a different experience versus some of our sales team or our support team say, okay, this customer is using this version of our software on that OS with Citrix version XYZ. Guess how they did their job before? Very hard, right? How many templates you have to keep, and that's combinatorial. So every time it's like, here we go again. In this different world they live in now, they can say, I have that template, flip it up, I'm done. And then when I'm done, I just throw it away. And when it's tested or validated, show it to the customer, say, you're using a third-party plugin that's causing a problem. Something like that couldn't be done before, but makes their life a lot less miserable and help people liberate themselves to do other things. So, like I said, mileage varies, but we're trying to help folks who help our customer in that context. They are probably as frustrated as our own people in the past.
Excellent point. So we've got some microphones. We've got some folks. If you have questions, we've got time.
Great.
Yeah, question for Dennis, and contrasting Susie and Dennis. Hey, g'day Susie. You can have Russell Crowe. We'll have pavlovas and crowd house. But if I contrast the two use cases between you, Susie sort of makes sense. You know, where you've got tens of thousands of users, you need a golden image. There's a lot of kind of obvious heavy lifting there. For you, Dennis, it seems to me that a lot of what you're talking about, mobility, enabling people to move away from paper, you know, all of that could be delivered through native apps. You know, there's no necessity to use Citrix for that. So I'm kind of trying to understand, you know, all of what you said was really valuable, and that is the business of the future, but it's not necessarily a business that only Citrix can deliver. So trying to understand how that came about, whether that was just a historical sort of paradigm that continued, or whether there's actually a value proposition there that's specific to Citrix.
It was actually a historical one. Like I said, we've been with Citrix for 17 years using their products, and it just was a natural transition to, as we upgraded to all the versions of it, just was a natural transition to start using that in the manufacturing process. And we didn't have to worry about buying full-blown PCs. We can get all WISE terminals and stuff like that.
So did you look at options? Because it seems that, you know, potentially, you know, you've got some existing applications, you know, potentially there could have been some interesting stuff that wouldn't have needed, I guess, the weight of you know, application virtualization and virtualization generally. You know, how much due diligence did you do on sort of other ways of achieving what you wanted?
Well, we were using Citrix, like I said, so there was really no need to look at other products. We already own the product, so there was no need to look at others. But our main ERP package, which runs all these programs you talk about with the manufacturing process, is an older application as well. So you had to kind of find the right software that's going to be able to handle that. And rather than putting, like I said, all full-blown PCs throughout the whole manufacturing process, it just made sense to stick with Citrix and go with thin clients.
Thanks. What is, if you were sitting in front of your Citrix, you know, strategy people that are building the products, the powers to be, where are the gaps? What would you like them to do more of to help continue to accelerate both the business proposition and the agility and the mindset that you've talked about where you're going with, you know, the important attributes of, for example, outsourcing or IT as a service in the case of cloud? What would you like them to do more? Where do you see the gaps? And you know, in general, beyond Citrix, in the, you know, the 5-year view that you're all talking about, what do you think the industry needs to do to meet the kind of requirements that you're looking for?
This is a question
Yeah.
for
It's for anyone?
anyone?
Yeah.
All of you.
Want to give that a shot?
I would say I'm very happy with what I heard this year. That there is an effort, and I think it's a theme. There's an effort to help people connect the dots on automation. That piece I like Citrix to do more of and do it faster. Because today I am asking my team, I invest in infrastructure software team to help me automate the stuff that I need to do. Not that we can and therefore we'll do it. That's not the purpose. The purpose is to create that kind of result. And if we can get a solution that help us do that a lot more easier, I like that very much to happen much faster. Because shopping and doing programming, that's just task. That's not the objective. So that I do appreciate. The other one, I think that the part that I think can do more of is really continue to tune the performance of these rich applications in your term. In our term, is really have to have the high fidelity experience. If you think, why are these devices you have go with retina display and this high resolution? Because by nature, we like to consume rich information and interact much better that way versus 2D drawing, and now it's graphic and you can really play with that virtual entity. We like to see that more often because someday I'd like to do presentation with a 3D walkthrough of this technology and how people can change versus a flat two-dimensional PowerPoint. If we get to that day, I'd be very happy. The part I think I don't think it's missing, but I think it's probably going to be an industry-level effort, which is ongoing. That we should define a standard interface, how people can plug into each other's service offering. If we can clean that up, define that, that will make the other part of the work much more easier. Because right now, if I have a template and I want to run in Amazon or in BT, who's going to do the work? I have to do all the work. I'd rather I don't do it. I'd rather we just come to terms, say, this is a standard interface, and we're going to play nice, and then we as an industry will help solve that problem, then find the other problem to solve going forward, as opposed to have this conviction of, got to be this stack, got to be that technology. That I do like to see that the industry come together to work on that together.
Jim, did you have some thoughts?
Actually, I think Chris covered them all. But Mark's keynote the other day was dead on for us. Everything I heard there was what I wanted to hear. I'm very happy with the engagement we've had, and it told me they're listening. So that's an important point. I think we need to keep that going forward because there's so much change coming, at least in healthcare. And I think that to have Citrix at the table and be engaged the way they are is really encouraging for us.
I think there's something I've been talking about for a couple of years, and it'll make the Citrix people laugh, is Citrix professional services. So Citrix badged, a deal with Citrix, and obviously partnering with whichever provider in the back end. So rather than the traditional SIs or our outsourcers taking the lead, actually flipping it on its head a little. Mm-hmm. That's what I'd like to see.
Paul DeBeese from Gartner. I spend most of my time talking to IT organizations and talk to literally hundreds of them during the course of the year. And many of them tell me that their business is working around them oftentimes, and that their employees don't completely trust them a lot of times. And I'm wondering if you had either or both of those challenges, and if so, how did Citrix help you overcome them?
I'll try to answer that anyways. So I mentioned earlier, we were the typical IT shop. We had the exact problem you just mentioned. And what we've done is actually, we've brought Citrix to the table. So we've set up a governance structure so we're engaging our clinicians more directly, and we're listening to them, but we're also bringing Citrix to the table so they can hear what they're saying and making sure that there's the right interpretation of the business requirements into technical specifications. So I think that dynamic is something that I encourage going forward. It's working well for us.
So you were listening to your customers and brought Citrix to the table to listen to them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We didn't want to just leave it up to the IT people to go in there and, you lose so much in interpretation, right? So technology people tend to hear what they want to hear. So by having Citrix at the table, the clinicians got the right answers from the right people. We all got on the same page, and I think that's the way we're going to continue with other vendors as well.
So for me, from a service provider point of view, we ended up in a situation a couple of years ago where internal IT and the cloud were fighting against each other. because actually people were going round internal IT, buying through the cloud. You created this whole shadow IT everyone hears about. So if you look at what we did with Citrix and some of the things we've started to work on, is we have the concept of bring your own zone. So we talk about bring your own device, which is bring your own device to work. What about helping the people in the IT departments who've got zones of resource, and they can connect that into a cloud and just make that part of a cloud and bring that together, rather than actually having a competition or a war between the two sides. And that's something we did with Citrix, is how we could extend out all of the automation and say, how would we adopt a zone of resource? Someone's got some hardware and software that is now available. How could we make that and adopt that into part of the cloud? And I think that's really changed the conversation with those the IT teams, because it's no longer a fight. It's actually how we work together.
I think that there is a general disconnect, particularly in the larger organisations, between the consumption of technology and the provisioning of technology. And now there's service integrators, obviously, and, that's great, but I think within a business, the concept of service integration and actually ensuring that the service delivery is really one area, and that's just your technology competency, but your integration is selecting those components from each of the towers or streams, whatever they may be, and making sure that they're suited to the end users. And I think if I look forward crystal ball-wise, that hopefully that's something, particularly from what I saw yesterday, the concept of being able to deliver the apps to the right device at the right time is certainly got a lot of potential in most businesses, surely.
I see IT change quite a bit. Obviously, I like what you said about it. They don't trust us. It's true. They didn't trust us for many, many years, but that's starting to change now, where before they would ask for stuff, and my default answer was, no, we can't do that. And they hate you for that. Now it's, sure, let me look and see what we can do for you. It's just changed completely, the whole aspect of it now.
So I would acknowledge we have both. And probably that's not an uncommon issue. But I think if you look at this topic a little bit differently, you would say that there's a very thin line between the gatekeeper that helps everybody get the best out of everything versus a roadblock, right? Very, very thin line, especially if your offering isn't there. So why would people go around you is that they're trying to do something and you haven't given them the stuff they need, for example. Obviously, there are folks like, hey, I like Mac. It looks much more prettier, but then they run Windows on Mac, right? So there are those folks, I understand. But on the flip side, it's about maybe we didn't give them a good enough sleek device, as opposed to forcing them to say, I have to justify this thing. So that's kind of my view. On the other topic, I do think trust is earned. Trust is earned. Just because you carry the title of I'm responsible for IT doesn't mean that you would trust me by default. I may be an idiot. I may be having a different objective that I'm trying to solve. So the way to earn those trust is through a couple of things. One, obviously, you need to be communicating very, very frequently and get people updated. Say, here's where we are. Here's what we're going to do. The other one is to actually partner up. And in this cloud deployment that we did, for example, let me just pick on that one. I partnered up with our VP of Global Engineering. I said, look, I cannot do it alone. I cannot. And I need your help. Let's do it together. And of course, I have to earn his trust first. And it's one step at a time. People have to trust that, can I really build product on this something that I hadn't even touched before? It's a totally new way of doing things. So trust is indeed earned. That's my perspective. It will take time, but if you're making the right move, making the right progress, you'll get there.
Thank you. Listening, partnering, and then following through. That's the formula for the trust, and that's what I've heard from all five of you. Thanks.
So I have time for one more question.
This is mainly for Susie, but I'd like to hear all of you chime in, particularly with what you're doing at the bank, where you're going through a whole big transformation. What is the desktop replacement on the same sort of level as, say, your core banking upgrade in terms of priority?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. It's a big shift, obviously, for banks where mainframe was everything, and then digital and online is obviously now also shifting even the back end focus as well. But certainly now our centralised virtual desktop infrastructure and the complementary components to that, all of your data and so on, that infrastructure, even though we're purchasing the service, has certainly got a much more greater level of priority and awareness, and you can imagine more change control and all those sort of things that go with that. But yes, absolutely, it's bumped it right up to the top, I'd say.
I agree with her. It's definitely just as important. We're rolling out a new ERP package for ourselves, and with Zen Desktop, it just makes it so much easier. Instead of running around to 600 different desktops to get this test environment in place so they can test it, with Zen Desktop, it's done in a couple hours. We're ready to go.
Neil, how about for you?
I just look at the volume of projects we have, and it's pretty simple, really, the amount of the desktop projects that are on the go, and I think that's a key area that maybe has been overlooked for a while, and they've done a lot of the back-end server virtualization, application virtualization, and that desktop environment is right on the radar now as a huge area for transforming, really, the IT that people have.
Well, folks, thank you for taking the time today, for sharing your wisdom, for sharing, the challenges that you face and all of that. So we look forward to continuing working with you and continuing that partnership, and I'm just really excited about the work that you're doing, kind of paving the way for our other customers to follow. So appreciate that sharing of knowledge. All of you, thank you so much for attending. Enjoy the rest of your Synergy and have a great day.